The fever had come on so suddenly that Martha Winters thought she might die right there in the dirt beside her child, and part of her welcomed it. She lay on the narrow bed in the back room of the boarding house, her body racked with chills despite the August heat that pressed down on South Pass City like a heavy hand. And through the haze of sickness, she could see her son Samuel sleeping fitfully in his cradle, 3 months old and already fatherless. The tears came again, hot and relentless, mixing with the sweat that soaked her nightdress, and she pressed her face into the rough pillow to muffle the sobs because she did not want to wake the baby or alert Mrs. Henderson downstairs that she had deteriorated further. The fever had started yesterday morning, just 3 days after she had buried Thomas in the windswept cemetery on the hill overlooking the mining town. 3 days since she had stood there with Samuel in her arms and watched them lower the pine box into the hard earth, the preacher's words meaningless against the roar of grief in her ears. Thomas had been crushed in a mine collapse, one of 4 men who died when the tunnel ceiling gave way without warning. He had been 24 years old, strong and vital, and he had kissed her goodbye that morning like he always did, his hand lingering on her cheek, his eyes soft when he looked at their son. Then he was gone, and she was alone in a town where she knew almost no one, with an infant to feed and no money beyond what little Thomas had managed to save. Martha had tried to hold herself together. She had accepted the casseroles from the church ladies, the awkward condolences from the miners who worked with Thomas, the envelope of money that the mining company gave her as if $47 could replace a husband. She had nursed Samuel and changed his diapers and rocked him when he cried, moving through the motions because she had to, because stopping meant surrendering to the black wave that threatened to pull her under. But then the fever came, and with it the weakness that made her limbs feel like lead, and now she lay here unable to rise, unable to care for her son, unable to do anything but cry and shake and pray that someone would find them before it was too late. The door opened, and Martha tried to lift her head but managed only a slight turn. Mrs. Henderson's worried face appeared, her gray hair pulled back in its usual severe bun, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Oh, child," the older woman said, hurrying forward, "you are burning up. I knew something was wrong when I did not hear you moving about this morning. Samuel," Martha whispered, her throat raw, "please take care of him." "Hush now, I will tend to the baby, but we need to get you some help. This fever is serious." Mrs. Henderson placed a cool hand on Martha's forehead and made a clucking sound. "I am sending Billy to fetch Nathan Stone. He is the closest thing we have to a doctor in these parts." Martha wanted to protest that she had no money for a doctor, that she could not afford more debt, but the words would not come. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the darkness pull at her, dimly aware of Mrs. Henderson moving around the room, of Samuel beginning to fuss, of the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Time became strange and fluid. Martha drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between fever dreams and waking nightmares. In her dreams, Thomas was alive again, smiling at her across the breakfast table, reaching for her in their bed, holding Samuel with such tenderness that her heart ached. Then she would wake to find herself alone, drenched in sweat, the truth crashing down on her anew. Each time she remembered, the grief hit like a physical blow, stealing her breath, making her body curl in on itself. The tears came in waves, sometimes quiet and resigned, sometimes loud and desperate, torn from somewhere deep inside her chest. She did not know how much time had passed when she heard new voices in the room. Male voices, low and calm. She forced her eyes open and saw a man standing beside the bed, tall and lean, with dark hair and serious gray eyes. He was maybe 26 or 27, dressed in worn trousers and a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He carried a leather bag, and when he met her gaze, his expression was kind but focused. "Mrs. Winters, my name is Nathan Stone," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Mrs. Henderson sent for me. I am going to examine you and see what we can do about this fever. Is that all right?" Martha tried to nod, but another sob escaped her instead, surprising her with its intensity. "I am sorry," she choked out. "I cannot stop crying. My husband, he just died, and I am so sick, and Samuel needs me, and I do not know what to do." Nathan did not look away from her distress the way so many people did. Instead, he pulled a wooden chair closer to the bed and sat down, bringing himself to her level. "I heard about your husband," he said quietly. "I am very sorry for your loss. Thomas Winters was a good man. He used to come by my place sometimes to talk about his son. He was so proud of that baby." The words made Martha cry harder, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Nathan let her cry, not rushing her or offering empty platitudes. He simply waited, his presence solid and calm, until the worst of the storm passed, and she lay exhausted against the pillow. "I am going to check you over now," he said gently. "May I?" She nodded, too tired to protest. Nathan's hands were careful and professional as he felt her forehead, checked her pulse, listened to her breathing. His touch was gentle but firm, and there was something competent about the way he moved that made Martha feel slightly less afraid. "How long have you had the fever?" he asked. "Since yesterday morning. It came on fast. I was feeling strange the night before, but I thought it was just the grief." "Have you been eating, drinking water?" Martha tried to remember. "Not much. I have not felt hungry, and Samuel needs to nurse, but I am not sure if my milk is all right with the fever." "We need to get fluids in you," Nathan said, straightening, "and something to bring this fever down. Mrs. Henderson, do you have willow bark tea?" "I do," the older woman said from somewhere near the cradle. "Good. Brew it strong, and we will need cool water and clean cloths. I am going to try to bring her temperature down." He turned back to Martha. "As for Samuel, your milk should be fine as long as you can manage to nurse him. Actually, it is probably the best thing for him right now, but we need to get you well first." Over the next hour, Nathan worked with quiet efficiency. He helped Martha sit up enough to drink the bitter willow bark tea, supporting her weight when her arms shook too much to hold the cup. He bathed her face and arms with cool water, changing the cloths frequently as they warmed against her skin. He asked Mrs. Henderson to open the window to let in fresh air despite the heat outside. And through it all, he talked to Martha in that same steady voice, asking her questions about Samuel, about where she came from, about anything that might keep her focused on something other than the fever and the grief. "I grew up in Ohio," Martha found herself saying, her voice weak but clearer than before. "On a farm. Thomas and I met at a church social. He wanted to go west, said there was opportunity here. I was scared, but I loved him, so I came." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He promised me we would build a good life here. He promised." "You still can," Nathan said, wringing out another cloth. "I know it does not feel like it now, but you have a son who needs you. That is a reason to keep going." "I am so tired," Martha whispered. "I am tired of being strong. I am tired of pretending I can do this. I am only 22 years old, and I am a widow with a baby and no money and no family out here, and I am so scared all the time." Nathan paused in his work and looked at her directly. "Then do not pretend. Be scared. Be tired. Be angry if you need to be. But do not give up. That boy in the cradle over there, he needs his mother. And you are stronger than you think, Martha Winters. You are fighting off a serious fever while dealing with grief that would break most people. That takes strength." Something in his words, or maybe just in the way he looked at her without pity or judgment, made Martha feel slightly less alone. She managed a tiny nod, and Nathan returned to his work. Samuel woke then, his cries thin and demanding. Mrs. Henderson picked him up and brought him to the bed. "He needs to eat, poor lamb." Martha tried to sit up, but the room spun dangerously. Nathan was there immediately, his arm behind her shoulders, helping her into a position where she could nurse. He arranged the pillows to support her back, and then discreetly turned away to give her privacy, busying himself with organizing the contents of his medical bag. As Samuel latched on and began to nurse, Martha felt a small surge of relief. At least she could still do this for him. At least she had not failed at this. She looked down at her son's small face, his eyes closed in concentration, his tiny hand curled against her chest, and she felt the love for him like a physical thing, fierce and protective. For him, she would fight this fever. For him, she would find a way to survive. When Samuel finished nursing, Nathan helped Martha lie back down. The willow bark tea was starting to work, she thought, or maybe just the cool water and the presence of someone who knew what he was doing. The fever still burned, but it felt slightly less overwhelming. "I need to check on a few other patients, but I will be back this evening," Nathan said, gathering his bag. "Mrs. Henderson will stay with you and make sure you keep drinking water. If the fever gets worse, send for me immediately." "I cannot pay you," Martha said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I mean, I have a little money, but I need it for food and rent, and I do not know when I will be able to work again, and I cannot afford a doctor. I am so sorry." Nathan held up a hand, stopping her. "I am not a real doctor. I learned medicine during the war, patching up soldiers. I never went to medical school, and I do not charge for my services, not really. People pay me what they can when they can. Sometimes that is money, sometimes it is food or help with repairs on my place. Sometimes it is nothing at all. Do not worry about payment. Just focus on getting well." "Thank you," Martha said, and the tears came again, but these were different, born of gratitude and relief rather than pure despair. Nathan gave her a small smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his serious face, making him look younger and less careworn. "You are welcome. Now get some rest. Doctor's orders." After he left, Martha lay quietly, listening to Mrs. Henderson humming as she tidied the room. The fever was still there, but the edge of panic had dulled. Someone was helping her. Someone cared whether she lived or died. It was not much, but it was something to hold on to. She slept fitfully through the afternoon, waking every hour or so to drink water that Mrs. Henderson pressed on her or to nurse Samuel again. Each time she woke, the grief was waiting, a constant ache in her chest that made it hard to breathe. She cried often, sometimes just silent tears slipping down her cheeks, sometimes harder sobs that left her exhausted. Mrs. Henderson sat with her, offering wordless comfort, her presence a steady anchor. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Nathan returned. He checked her temperature again, his fingers cool against her burning skin, and she saw satisfaction cross his face. "The fever is down a bit," he said. "Not gone, but lower than it was this morning. That is a good sign. How do you feel?" "Tired," Martha admitted. "Weak, but maybe not quite as bad." "That is what I hope to hear." Nathan pulled the chair close again and sat down. "I brought you some beef broth. Mrs. Henderson said you have not eaten much in days. You need to get something in your stomach, especially if you are nursing." He helped her sit up again, patient when her hands shook, and fed her the broth spoonful by spoonful. It was warm and salty and surprisingly good, and Martha realized she was actually hungry. She managed to eat most of it before exhaustion claimed her again. "Better," Nathan said approvingly. "Keep that down, and we will try some bread in the morning." As he set the bowl aside, Martha found herself studying him. There was something calm and capable about Nathan Stone, something that made her feel safe. His gray eyes were kind, and there was a gentleness in the way he handled her that spoke of genuine compassion. She realized she wanted him to stay, wanted the comfort of his presence, and the thought made her feel guilty. Thomas had been dead for less than a week. She should not be finding comfort in another man's company. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan said quietly, "It is all right to accept help, you know. It does not mean you loved your husband any less. It just means you are human and you need support right now." Martha felt more tears coming, but she was too tired to fight them. "How did you know what I was thinking?" "I have seen a lot of grief," Nathan said. "During the war and after, people feel guilty for all sorts of things when someone they love dies. Guilty for surviving, guilty for laughing, guilty for wanting to keep living. But none of it is wrong. Your husband would want you to accept help. He would want you to get well so you can raise your son." "Did you lose someone?" Martha asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Nathan's expression flickered, something painful crossing his face. "Yes, my wife. 4 years ago in '69. She died in childbirth along with our baby, a daughter." "Oh God," Martha breathed. "I am so sorry." "It was a long time ago," Nathan said, but his voice carried the weight of old sorrow. "I know what it is like, that first terrible aftermath. The feeling that you might drown in it, the guilt for having moments when you forget, even for a second, and then the pain of remembering all over again. It gets easier, eventually. Not easy, but easier. The grief becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you." Martha reached out without thinking, her hand finding his where it rested on the edge of the bed. His skin was warm and rough with calluses. "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for being here." Nathan looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then he gently squeezed her fingers and stood. "I will be back in the morning. Try to sleep. Mrs. Henderson will be here if you need anything." After he left, Martha lay in the gathering darkness and thought about what he had said. The idea that the grief might become bearable someday seemed impossible, but Nathan had survived his loss. Maybe she could survive hers too. The night was long and difficult. The fever spiked again around midnight, and Martha spent hours shaking with chills and then burning with heat. She drifted in and out of nightmares where Thomas was calling to her from somewhere she could not reach, where Samuel was crying and she could not get to him, where she was falling into darkness with no bottom. Each time she woke, Mrs. Henderson was there with cool water and soft words, and eventually Martha would slip back into restless sleep. Morning came gray and hot, another August day pressing down on South Pass City. Martha woke to find Nathan beside her bed again, his face creased with concern as he checked her pulse. "The fever went back up in the night," Mrs. Henderson was saying. "She was very restless. I can see that." Nathan looked tired, as if he had not slept much himself. "Martha, can you hear me?" "Yes," she managed, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I am going to give you something stronger for the fever, quinine. It tastes terrible, but it should help." He mixed a powder into water and helped her drink it. She gagged on the bitter taste, but he made her finish every drop. Over the next 2 days, Martha existed in a haze of fever and grief and Nathan's steady presence. He came 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening, always bringing food or medicine, always checking on Samuel, always talking to her in that calm, reassuring voice. Mrs. Henderson stayed during the day, but at night, it was Nathan who sat beside her bed, bathing her face with cool water when the fever raged, holding her hand when the grief made her cry, singing soft songs when she could not sleep. "Where did you learn that song?" Martha asked one night, her voice hoarse from crying. "My mother used to sing it," Nathan said. She died when I was 16, but I never forgot her voice. Will you tell me about her? So Nathan talked, his words weaving through the darkness, giving her something to focus on besides the pain. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his mother who had been a teacher, about his father who had been a blacksmith. He told her about the war, though she could tell he left out the worst parts, about learning medicine in field hospitals where the screaming never stopped. He told her about coming west afterward, looking for a fresh start, about building his cabin outside of town with his own hands. "Why are you not married?" Martha asked during one of their long night conversations. The fever made her bold, stripping away the usual social niceties. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "After Sarah died, I could not imagine loving anyone else. It felt like a betrayal, and this is not an easy place for women. I did not want to bring someone out here just to watch them suffer. But you help people. You help women like me. That is different. Helping someone survive is not the same as asking them to build a life with you." He paused, then added softly, "Though lately I have been wondering if maybe I was wrong, if maybe staying alone is not the answer either." Martha did not know what to say to that. She drifted back to sleep with his hand still holding hers. On the third morning after Nathan started treating her, Martha woke to find the fever had finally broken. She was weak and shaky, drenched in sweat, but her mind was clear for the first time in days. Sunlight streamed through the window, and she could hear the sounds of the town outside, miners heading to work, wagons rumbling past, someone calling to someone else in greeting. Samuel was awake in his cradle, making small cooing sounds. Martha tried to sit up and managed it with effort, her arms trembling with the strain. Mrs. Henderson hurried over. "Easy now, child. The fever broke about an hour ago. Mr. Stone said to let you sleep. He was here. Left about 20 minutes past. He has been here most of the night. That man barely leaves your side." Mrs. Henderson helped Martha into a clean nightdress and changed the sheets on the bed. "Now, you stay put while I get you some breakfast. Real food this time, not just broth." When Nathan came by later that morning, Martha was sitting up in bed, having managed to eat some porridge and nurse Samuel. She felt hollowed out and fragile but alive. "You look much better," Nathan said, and the relief in his voice was evident. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a horse," Martha admitted. "But the fever is gone, I think." Nathan checked her over, his examination thorough. "Yes, the fever is gone. You are through the worst of it. Now you just need to rest and regain your strength. No getting up and trying to do too much. Your body has been through a lot." "I do not know how to thank you," Martha said, looking at him directly. "You saved my life. You and Mrs. Henderson. I would have died without you." "You saved yourself," Nathan said. "You fought hard. You had a reason to fight." He glanced at Samuel, sleeping peacefully now. "He is a beautiful baby. He has your eyes. He has Thomas's nose and his hands." Martha felt the familiar ache in her chest, but found that this time it did not threaten to overwhelm her. "I miss him so much, I know, and you will for a long time. But you are going to be all right, both of you." Over the following week, Martha slowly recovered her strength. Nathan visited every day, checking on her progress, bringing food from various townspeople who wanted to help, playing with Samuel while Martha rested. Mrs. Henderson stayed close, helping with laundry and cooking, refusing to accept more than token payment. "The town takes care of its own," she said firmly when Martha tried to protest. "You are one of us now, like it or not." As Martha grew stronger, she and Nathan fell into long conversations. He would sit beside her bed or in the chair by the window, and they would talk for hours. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents who had both died before she married Thomas, about her dreams of having a big family and a home of her own. He told her about his work treating the miners and their families. about his plans to maybe build a real clinic someday, about the books he ordered from back east, because he was always trying to learn more about medicine. Martha found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both comforted and troubled her. Nathan was kind and intelligent and easy to talk to, and when he smiled at her, she felt warmth bloom in her chest. But Thomas had been dead for less than 2 weeks. She should not be feeling this way about another man. She should not be noticing the way Nathan's eyes crinkled when he laughed, or the gentleness in his hands when he held Samuel. One afternoon, about 10 days after the fever broke, Martha was strong enough to sit in the chair by the window. Nathan had brought her some wildflowers in a tin cup, and she was arranging them when he said, "I have been thinking about your situation." Martha looked up, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "My situation? You need work, and you cannot do heavy labor, not with a baby to care for. Mrs. Henderson tells me you are good with sewing." "I can sew, yes. My mother taught me. I used to make all our clothes back in Ohio." "The town could use a seamstress. Right now people have to send away for clothes or make their own, and most of the miners are not handy with a needle. If you could set up a shop, take in mending and alterations, maybe make dresses for the women, I think you could make a living." Martha considered this. "I would need supplies, fabric, thread, needles, and a sewing machine would help, though I could manage without one. There is a storefront on Main Street, just a small place, but it has a back room where you could live with Samuel. The owner died last month, and his widow moved back east. I think she would rent it cheap to someone who would take care of it." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I could help you get started. A loan to be paid back when you can, or not paid back if that is what works." "I cannot take your money," Martha protested. "You have already done so much. You can and you will," Nathan said firmly. "Consider it an investment in the town. We need a seamstress, and you need a way to support yourself and Samuel. It makes sense for everyone." Martha felt tears pricking her eyes again, but these were different. These were tears of gratitude and hope. "Why are you doing this for me?" "You barely know me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "Maybe because I know what it is like to feel alone and hopeless. Maybe because I wish someone had been there to help me when Sarah died. Or maybe because I have come to care about what happens to you and Samuel." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Martha's heart beat faster, and she did not know what to say. Before she could find words, Nathan stood abruptly. "Think about it," he said. "Let me know what you decide." After he left, Martha sat by the window and watched the street below. Miners walked past, heading home after their shifts. Women hurried along with baskets over their arms. A dog chased a chicken down the dusty road. Life continued, indifferent to grief and loss and the small, hopeful stirrings in her chest. Could she do this? Could she start over, build a business, raise Samuel on her own? The idea was terrifying but also strangely exciting. She had been so passive in her life with Thomas, following where he led, trusting him to make the decisions. Now she would have to be the one who decided, the one who took risks, the one who built the future, and Nathan would be there, at least as a friend. The thought brought comfort and confusion in equal measure. 2 days later, Martha went to see the storefront. She was still weak, but Nathan helped her walk the 3 blocks from the boarding house, carrying Samuel in one arm and supporting her with the other. The shop was small but sturdy, with a large front window that let in good light. The back room had a stove, a sink with a pump, and space for a bed and the cradle. It was simple, but it could be home. "What do you think?" Nathan asked. Martha walked slowly through the space, imagining where she would put her work table, where she would display finished garments, where Samuel could play as he got older. "I think it could work. I will talk to Mrs. Garrett about the rent." And tomorrow we can go to the general store and see about supplies. Over the next week, Nathan helped Martha transform the empty shop into a functioning business. He brought in a sturdy table for cutting and sewing, built shelves for storing fabric and notions, hung a sign outside that said Mrs. Winters, seamstress and alterations in neat black letters. Mrs. Henderson spread the word around town, and before Martha had officially opened, 3 women had come by to ask about having dresses made. Nathan also helped her move from the boarding house into the back room. It was strange and sad, packing up the few belongings she and Thomas had accumulated, folding his clothes into a trunk because she could not bear to give them away yet. Nathan was patient with her tears, with the moments when grief would ambush her and leave her shaking. He never rushed her or told her to be strong. He just stayed close and let her feel what she needed to feel. The night before she officially opened the shop, Nathan brought dinner and ate with her in the back room. Samuel was asleep in his cradle, and the August evening was finally cooling down. They sat at the small table, eating beef stew and bread, and talked about plans for the business. "I think you should make some sample garments to display in the window," Nathan suggested. "Show people what you can do." "I was thinking the same thing, maybe a nice dress and a shirt. I can use some of the cheaper fabric for that. You could also offer to teach sewing lessons. Some of the younger women might want to learn." Martha smiled. "You have thought a lot about this. I want you to succeed. You and Samuel deserve security and happiness." The way he said it with such sincerity made Martha's heart ache in a new way. She set down her fork and looked at him directly. "Nathan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. All right. Why are you really doing all of this? It is more than just helping someone in need. You have spent weeks taking care of me, helping me set up this business, being here almost every day. Why?" Nathan looked down at his hands, then back at her. "Because when I am with you, I feel alive again in a way I have not felt since Sarah died. Because talking to you is the best part of my day. Because when I saw you lying there sick and heartbroken, something in me woke up, and I realized I had been sleepwalking through the last 4 years." He paused, then added quietly, "Because I think I am falling in love with you, and I know that is probably the worst thing I could say right now, with your husband barely in the ground and you still grieving. But you asked for honesty." Martha could not breathe. The words hung between them, true and terrifying and impossibly complicated. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted. "I do not expect anything from you. I just needed you to know. So you understand why I keep showing up, why I want to help you. It is not pity or charity. It is because I care about you more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time." Martha felt tears on her cheeks again. "I love Thomas. I still love him. The grief is so big sometimes I think it might swallow me whole. I know, and that is all right. I am not asking you to stop loving him or to stop grieving. I am just telling you that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the confession settling between them. Finally, Martha said softly, "I feel it too. This thing between us. And it scares me because it seems wrong, like I am betraying Thomas's memory. But when you are here, I feel less alone. I feel like maybe I can survive this after all, and I do not know what to do with that." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "Then do not do anything. Just let it be what it is for now. We do not have to define it or rush it. We can just be 2 people who care about each other, helping each other through hard times. The rest can wait." Martha nodded, holding tight to his hand like a lifeline. "I would like that." The shop opened the next day, and Martha was surprised by how many people came by. Some wanted to place orders, some just wanted to introduce themselves and welcome her to the community properly. The women who had lost their husbands in the mine collapse came as a group, bringing food and offers of friendship. By the end of the first week, Martha had more work than she could handle, which meant long hours at the sewing table but also the satisfaction of earning her own money, of building something for herself and Samuel. Nathan continued to visit regularly, but they were careful to maintain propriety. He always came during the day when other people might stop by, never staying too late into the evening. They talked as friends, sharing meals sometimes, discussing Samuel's development and the happenings in town. But there was an undercurrent to every conversation now, an awareness of what had been said, of feelings that were growing whether either of them wanted them to or not. As August turned to September, the weather in South Pass City began to cool. The leaves on the few trees that grew at this elevation started to turn gold and red. Martha found a rhythm to her days, waking early to nurse Samuel, working on orders while he napped, playing with him in the afternoon, working more in the evening after he went to sleep. The grief was still there, a constant companion, but it had become more bearable, just as Nathan had promised. She still cried for Thomas, still missed him with an ache that felt physical, but she also found herself laughing sometimes, enjoying her work, looking forward to the future. One afternoon in mid-September, Nathan stopped by the shop with a basket covered with a cloth. "I brought lunch," he announced. "It is too beautiful a day to stay inside. Let me take you and Samuel up to the meadow above town." Martha hesitated. Going on what amounted to a picnic with Nathan felt like crossing a line somehow. But Samuel was fussy and could probably use some fresh air, and the shop was stuffy despite the open windows. "Just as friends," Nathan added, as if reading her thoughts. "I promise to be perfectly respectable." She found herself smiling. "All right, let me get Samuel's things." They walked slowly up the hill, taking the path that led away from the cemetery, neither of them mentioning the avoidance. The meadow Nathan led them to was sheltered by rocks on three sides and filled with late summer wildflowers. He spread a blanket in the sun, and they sat down with Samuel between them. The baby was 4.5 months old now, growing round-cheeked and alert. He could hold his head up well and was starting to grab at things. Nathan dangled a wildflower over him, and Samuel reached for it with both hands, his face scrunched in concentration. When he caught it, he immediately tried to put it in his mouth. "No, no," Martha laughed, gently taking it away. "We do not eat flowers." "He is getting so big," Nathan observed. "Soon he will be crawling everywhere." "I know, it is going so fast." Martha felt a pang of sadness. Thomas was missing all of this, every milestone, every small change. He would never see his son smile or hear him laugh or watch him take his first steps. Nathan seemed to sense her thoughts. "Do you talk to Samuel about his father?" "Sometimes. I tell him stories about Thomas, about how much his daddy loved him. I do not want him to grow up not knowing." She paused, then added, "I am afraid he will not remember anything about Thomas at all. He will not have memories, no. But he will have the stories you tell him, and the love you had for Thomas. That will be part of him, even if he does not remember the man himself." They ate the lunch Nathan had brought, simple sandwiches and apples, and watched clouds drift across the blue Wyoming sky. Samuel fell asleep on the blanket between them, one small fist curled against his cheek. "Can I ask you something?" Martha said after a while. "Of course. Do you still love Sarah, your wife?" Nathan thought about this carefully. "I will always love her. She was my first love, and we had plans and dreams together that died with her. But the pain is different now. It is not sharp anymore, more like an old scar that aches sometimes but does not bleed. I can think about her and smile at the memories instead of just feeling loss." "Do you think she would want you to be alone forever?" "No. Sarah was practical and kind. She would want me to be happy. She would probably be frustrated that I waited this long." He looked at Martha, his gray eyes serious. "Do you think Thomas would want you to be alone?" Martha had asked herself this question many times late at night. No, Thomas loved me. He wanted me to be happy and secure, but it still feels wrong somehow to think about being with someone else, like I am moving on too fast. "There is no right timeline for grief," Nathan said gently. "And what you feel, what we both feel, it does not mean you love Thomas any less. The heart is not a finite thing. It can hold love and loss and hope all at the same time." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching Samuel sleep, and Martha felt something shift inside her. Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe it was possible to honor the past while still reaching for the future. Maybe love was not a betrayal of memory but a continuation of it. As September wore on, Martha and Nathan grew closer. He helped her with small repairs around the shop, fixing a stuck window and reinforcing the shelves. She mended his shirts and made him new ones when she insisted the old ones were beyond saving. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes at the shop, sometimes at Nathan's cabin outside of town. Mrs. Henderson chaperoned when people started to talk, which made both of them laugh and roll their eyes, but they accepted it because appearances mattered in a small town. Martha found herself thinking about Nathan constantly, the way he looked at Samuel with such tenderness, the sound of his laugh, rare but wonderful when it came, the strength in his hands when he helped her move heavy bolts of fabric, the intelligence in his eyes when they discussed books or politics or the future of the territory. He was good and kind and steady, and she was falling in love with him despite her best efforts not to. But the guilt was still there. Sometimes she would wake in the night, and in the confused space between sleep and waking, she would forget that Thomas was gone. She would reach out for him, expecting to find him beside her, and the shock of the empty bed would hit her all over again. In those moments, thinking about Nathan felt like a betrayal so profound she could barely breathe. One evening in early October, Nathan found her crying in the shop after closing. Samuel was asleep in the back room, and she was sitting at her work table with her head in her hands, sobbing quietly. "Martha, what is wrong?" Nathan knelt beside her chair, his hand on her shoulder. "I forgot," she choked out. "Just for a moment I forgot that Thomas was dead. I heard a man laughing on the street and it sounded like him, and I thought he was coming home. And then I remembered, and it hurt so much, and I felt so guilty because I have been thinking about you so much lately. And what kind of wife am I that I can forget my husband is dead?" Nathan pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest. "You are human," he said firmly. "You are a woman who is doing her best to survive impossible circumstances, and you did not forget Thomas. Your mind played a trick on you for 1 second. That is all. It does not mean you loved him any less." "But I am falling in love with you," Martha whispered against his shirt. "And Thomas has only been dead for 2 months. 2 months. What does that say about me?" Nathan pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her tear-stained cheeks. "It says you have a big heart and the courage to keep living even when it hurts. It says you are strong enough to let yourself feel things even when they are complicated and messy. And it says nothing at all about how much you love Thomas, because I know you loved him. I know you still love him. Love does not just disappear because someone dies. How do you live with it?" Martha asked desperately. "The guilt and the grief and the new feelings all mixed together. You just do. One day at a time. You give yourself permission to feel everything without judging yourself for it, and you remember that Thomas loved you and wanted you to be happy. He would not want you to spend the rest of your life alone and grieving. How can you be so sure? Because that is what love does. Real love wants the best for the other person, even when you are not there to see it." Martha closed her eyes and leaned into Nathan's touch. "I am so tired of fighting this. Then stop fighting. Let yourself feel what you feel. We do not have to rush anything. We do not have to make any decisions right now. We can just be together and see what happens." That night, after Nathan left, Martha sat with Samuel and told him about his father. She told him how Thomas had smiled when he learned Martha was pregnant, how he had built the cradle with his own hands, how he had cried the first time he held his son. She told him about the plans they had made, the house they were going to build, the life they were going to have. And then she told him about Nathan, about the man who had saved their lives and was helping them build a new future. "I think your daddy would like Nathan," she said softly. "I think he would be glad that someone is taking care of us. And I hope, when you are old enough to understand, you will not think less of me for loving again." Samuel made a small sound in his sleep, and Martha took it as acceptance. The days grew shorter and colder as October progressed. Martha worked on making warmer clothes for Samuel and herself, and Nathan brought wood for her stove, insisting she take it even though he must have spent hours chopping and hauling it. The town prepared for winter, everyone stocking up on supplies before the worst of the weather hit. One afternoon, Nathan arrived at the shop looking excited. "I have something to show you. Can you close up early?" Curious, Martha bundled Samuel in warm clothes, locked the shop, and followed Nathan through town. He led them to a building near the church, larger than her shop, with a freshly painted sign that read South Pass City Clinic. "You did it," Martha breathed. "You opened your clinic. I am opening it next week, but I wanted you to see it first." Nathan unlocked the door and showed her around. There was a front room for examinations, a back room for supplies and more serious cases, even a small office where he could keep records. It was simple but well organized, and Martha could see the care he had put into setting it up. "I am so proud of you," she said, meaning it with all her heart. "I could not have done it without you," Nathan said. "You showed me that it is possible to start over, to build something new even after loss. You inspired me." They stood close together in the empty clinic, and Martha felt the pull between them, strong and undeniable. Nathan must have felt it too, because he leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Martha Winters. I know it is fast, and I know the situation is complicated, but I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you talk to Samuel. I love your laugh and your determination and the fact that you never give up. I love all of you, and I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Martha felt tears on her cheeks, but for once they were happy tears. "I love you too. I still love Thomas, and I probably always will, but I love you too, and I think that is all right. I think both things can be true." "Both things can definitely be true," Nathan agreed. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Martha let herself sink into it, let herself feel the joy and the hope and the love without guilt. When they told Mrs. Henderson about their relationship, the older woman just smiled and said, "About time. I have been waiting for you two to figure it out." The town was more mixed in its reactions. Some people were happy for them, while others thought it was too soon after Thomas's death and whispered about propriety. Martha tried not to let the gossip bother her, but sometimes it stung. Nathan reminded her that people would talk no matter what they did, and the important thing was that they knew the truth of their own hearts. As November arrived and the first snow fell on South Pass City, Nathan proposed properly. He came to the shop one evening with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I know we have not been courting long in the traditional sense," he said, kneeling beside where Martha sat with Samuel. "And I know some people think we are rushing. But I have lost enough time to fear and grief. I do not want to waste any more. Martha, will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to Samuel and build a family with you?" "Yes," Martha said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in late November in the small church, with Mrs. Henderson and a handful of close friends in attendance. Martha wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue with delicate embroidery around the collar. Nathan wore a new suit, and Samuel wore the christening gown Martha had sewn from lace and fine cotton. It was simple and quick, but when Nathan kissed her as his wife, Martha felt happiness bloom in her chest for the first time in months. They spent their wedding night in Nathan's cabin, which would now be their home. Mrs. Henderson had agreed to watch Samuel, giving them one night alone. The cabin was small but sturdy, built against the hillside with a good view of the valley. Nathan had spent the day making it nice, bringing in wildflowers even though it was late in the season, building up the fire until the room was warm and cozy. "Are you sure about this?" Nathan asked as they stood together near the fire. "I know it is fast. I know people will judge you." Martha reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I am sure. I love you, Nathan Stone. You saved my life in more ways than one. You showed me that it is possible to survive the worst loss and still find joy again. I want to build a life with you. I want Samuel to grow up knowing you as his father. I want whatever future we can make together." They made love slowly and tenderly, taking time to learn each other, to savor the intimacy and connection. Afterward, lying in Nathan's arms, Martha felt at peace for the first time since Thomas died. The grief was still there, a part of her now, but it no longer defined her. She was more than her loss. She was a mother and a wife and a businesswoman. She was a survivor. She was loved. The winter was hard, as winters always were in Wyoming. The snow piled high and the wind cut like a knife. But the cabin was warm, and Martha's shop stayed busy with people needing warm clothes and repairs. Samuel grew and thrived, reaching 6 months, and then 7, beginning to sit up on his own and babble in proto-conversation. Nathan's clinic served the community well, and he was called out at all hours to treat injuries and illnesses. They settled into domestic life with surprising ease. Martha would work in her shop during the day while Nathan was at the clinic, and they would come together in the evenings to cook dinner and care for Samuel. They talked about everything, from the mundane details of daily life to deeper questions about faith and purpose, and what kind of world they wanted Samuel to grow up in. They laughed together and sometimes cried together when the grief crept back in, and they built a foundation of trust and love that grew stronger every day. On Christmas Eve, they decorated the cabin with pine branches and candles. Samuel was almost 8 months old, fascinated by the flickering lights and the smell of the evergreen. Nathan had carved him a set of wooden blocks, and Martha had made him new clothes that he was already growing out of. "I have something for you," Nathan said after they put Samuel to bed. He handed Martha a wrapped package, nervous excitement on his face. Inside was a book, leather-bound and clearly expensive. When Martha opened it, she saw it was blank, pages waiting to be filled. "I thought you could write down stories for Samuel," Nathan explained. "About Thomas, about your life before Wyoming, about how we met and fell in love. That way he will always have those stories, even when we are old and our memories are not as sharp." Martha felt tears spring to her eyes. "This is perfect, thank you." She kissed him softly. "I have something for you too." She handed him a package, and when he opened it, he found a new medical bag, beautifully crafted from sturdy leather with his name embossed on the side. "Your old bag is falling apart," Martha said. "I commissioned this from the tanner. I wanted you to have something that would last." "It is wonderful," Nathan said, examining the bag with appreciation. "You are wonderful." That night, sitting by the fire with Nathan's arm around her, Martha thought about how much her life had changed in 6 months. In June, she had been a desperate widow with a baby, sick and grieving and ready to give up. Now she had a home, a business, a husband who loved her, and a future that looked bright. Thomas would always be part of her story, always be Samuel's father in memory if not in life, but Nathan was here now, real and solid and devoted. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, pulling her closer. "About how lucky I am. About how life can surprise you, even when you think everything is over." "I am the lucky one," Nathan said. "You and Samuel gave me a reason to live again. You reminded me that love is not just pain and loss, it can be joy and hope too." As the new year of 1874 arrived, Martha felt herself fully embracing her new life. She and Nathan worked together to expand both their businesses, with Nathan taking on more patients and Martha hiring a young woman named Clara to help with the simpler alterations, so she could focus on the more intricate work. Samuel was crawling now, getting into everything, laughing and babbling and filling the house with energy. In February, Martha realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice and was feeling the familiar nausea she remembered from when she carried Samuel. The realization brought a complicated mix of emotions. She was happy, excited to give Samuel a sibling and to have a child with Nathan. But there was also sadness, a sharp reminder that Thomas should have been the one giving her more children, should have been there to see his son grow up. When she told Nathan, he was overjoyed. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then immediately set her down and apologized for jostling her. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "A real father, not just a stepfather." "You are already a real father to Samuel," Martha said firmly. "Blood does not make you a parent, love does, and you love him as much as any father could." "I do," Nathan agreed. "And I will love this baby just as much. We are going to have a family, Martha, a real family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring. Martha's belly grew round, and Samuel, now walking unsteadily, liked to pat it and babble to his future sibling. Nathan was attentive and excited, reading everything he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, determined that nothing would go wrong this time. One evening in May, as Martha sat sewing baby clothes, Nathan said quietly, "I am afraid." Martha looked up, surprised. Nathan was not someone who admitted fear easily. "Of what?" "Of losing you the way I lost Sarah. Of something going wrong with the birth. I know it is irrational. I know you are healthy and strong, but I cannot stop thinking about it." Martha set down her sewing and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I am afraid too. Birth is always risky, but I am going to be fine. We are going to be fine. You are an excellent doctor, and Mrs. Henderson will be there to help, and I am going to fight like hell to stay alive because I have too much to live for now." "Promise me," Nathan said fiercely. "Promise me you will fight." "I promise." The baby came in late September, a little girl with Nathan's gray eyes and Martha's dark hair. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Nathan's fear was written plainly on his face, but Martha pushed through with determination, and Mrs. Henderson's steady coaching. When the baby finally arrived, crying lustily, Nathan wept with relief. "She is perfect," he said, holding his daughter with shaking hands. "She is absolutely perfect." They named her Sarah, for Nathan's first wife, and Rose for Martha's mother. Samuel, now 15 months old, was fascinated by his tiny sister, always wanting to pat her gently and bring her his toys. Martha recovered quickly from the birth, eager to get back to her work and her family. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. It was busier and more chaotic, but also fuller and happier. Nathan's clinic was thriving, and Martha's shop had become an essential part of the community. They had built a good life in South Pass City, with friends and stability and love. On a warm afternoon in October 1874, 2 years after they first met, Nathan and Martha took the children up to the meadow where they had their first picnic. Samuel ran around picking flowers, and baby Sarah slept in Martha's arms, and they sat together on a blanket watching the clouds drift by. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Marrying me so soon after Thomas died, dealing with the gossip and the judgment?" Martha thought about the question carefully. "No, I do not regret it. I wish Thomas was alive. I wish Samuel could have known his father, but I do not regret choosing to live and to love again. You gave me back my life, Nathan. You and Sarah Rose are gifts I never expected but am grateful for every day." "I love you," Nathan said simply. "I love all of you. You are my family, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are happy and safe." Samuel came running over then, his hands full of wildflowers, demanding that they make a crown for his sister. As they wove the flowers together, laughing at Samuel's serious concentration, Martha felt a profound sense of contentment. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned when she first came to Wyoming with Thomas. She had known terrible loss and grief, but she had also found strength she did not know she had, and a love that was deep and enduring and true. Years passed in South Pass City, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Samuel grew into a bright, curious boy who loved helping Nathan at the clinic and listening to Martha's stories about his father. Sarah Rose was energetic and fearless, always climbing things she should not and asking questions about everything. In 1876, Martha gave birth to twin boys, Noah and Nathaniel, who looked so much like their father that it made everyone smile. Martha continued to run her shop, though she reduced her hours as the children grew and needed more attention. Nathan's clinic expanded, and he eventually took on an assistant, a young doctor from the East who wanted to learn frontier medicine. They built a larger house, one with enough room for their growing family and a proper workshop for Martha's sewing. On summer evenings, the whole family would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Martha would tell stories, Nathan would play the harmonica he had taught himself, and the children would run around catching fireflies. Those were the moments Martha treasured most, the simple domestic happiness she had thought lost forever when Thomas died. Samuel grew up knowing he had two fathers, one who loved him in memory and one who loved him every day. Martha made sure he heard stories about Thomas, about his bravery and his dreams for the future. Nathan never tried to replace Thomas, but instead honored his memory by being the best father he could be. Samuel called Nathan Pa without hesitation, but he also knew about his birth father and was proud of both men. When Samuel was 16, he came to Martha with questions about Thomas. They sat together on the porch, just the two of them, and Martha told him everything. About falling in love young, about coming west full of hope, about the terrible day Thomas died. She told him about the fever and the grief, about Nathan saving her life in more ways than one, about choosing to love again even when it felt impossible. "You think Pa minded?" Samuel asked. "That you married Nathan so soon?" "No," Martha said with certainty. "Your father loved me. He wanted me to be happy and safe. He would have wanted someone to take care of us. And Nathan, he is a good man. He loved you from the first moment he held you. Your father would have appreciated that." "I wish I could have known him," Samuel said quietly. "So do I. But you carry him with you in your name and your face and your spirit, and the stories keep him alive. That is what we have to hold on to." In 1883, when Samuel was 11, the family took a trip to the cemetery on the anniversary of Thomas's death. It was something they did every year, a way of honoring the man who had been Martha's first love and Samuel's birth father. They brought flowers and cleaned the headstone and stood together in the Wyoming wind. Nathan held Sarah Rose's hand, the twins clinging to his legs, while Martha and Samuel stood closest to the grave. "Thank you," Martha said softly, speaking to Thomas as if he could hear. "Thank you for loving me, for giving me Samuel, for teaching me what love could be. I hope you would be proud of the man I married and the family we have built. I hope you are at peace." Samuel placed his flowers on the grave, his young face serious. "I will make you proud, Pa," he said. "I will be a good man like you and like my father Nathan." As they walked back down the hill, Nathan took Martha's hand. "You all right?" "I am," Martha said, and she meant it. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer hurt the way it once had. Thomas was part of her past, a cherished memory, but Nathan and the children were her present and her future. The years continued to pass, bringing the usual mix of joy and sorrow that made up a life. There were good harvests and hard winters, births and deaths, laughter and tears. Samuel grew into a fine young man and eventually went east to study medicine, wanting to follow in Nathan's footsteps. Sarah Rose married a rancher and gave Martha and Nathan their first grandchildren. The twins became partners in running a freight business between South Pass City and the railroad. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Martha back to the meadow where they had their first picnic. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but the love between them was as strong as ever. 20 years, Nathan marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday you were lying in that boarding house, burning with fever and crying with grief. And sometimes it feels like we have been together forever." "Both things can be true," Martha said, echoing words they had said to each other many times over the years. She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in his presence. "I never thought I would be this happy again after Thomas died. I thought my life was over at 22, but you showed me it was just beginning a new chapter." "We showed each other," Nathan corrected. "You saved me as much as I saved you. Before you, I was just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to really live again." They sat together watching the sun set, and Martha thought about the winding path that had brought her to this moment. The grief and fear and uncertainty of those early days in South Pass City seemed like they had happened to a different person, though she knew they had shaped her into who she was now. She had loved 2 good men in her life, had been blessed with children and a career and a home. She had survived the worst loss imaginable and found her way back to joy. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan said, "What are you thinking about?" "About how grateful I am. For you, for our children, for this life we have built, for every day we get together." "I am grateful too," Nathan said, pulling her close. "For every moment, every challenge, every joy. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Martha Stone." They stayed in the meadow until full dark, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the vast Wyoming landscape that had witnessed so much of their story. And when they finally walked back down to town, hand in hand in the starlight, Martha felt at peace with all of it, the love and the loss, the grief and the healing, the past and the present woven together into a life well lived. Years later, when Martha and Nathan were old and their children were grown with families of their own, they would sit together on the porch of their house and tell stories. Stories about the wild early days of South Pass City, about the mines and the miners, about winter storms and summer heat. Stories about Thomas and Sarah, the spouses they had lost but never forgotten. Stories about falling in love in the midst of grief, about choosing hope when despair seemed easier, about building a family from heartbreak and determination. Samuel would bring his own children to visit, and they would sit at Martha's feet and listen wide-eyed as she told them about their grandfather Thomas, the man they had never met but whose blood ran in their veins. She would tell them about the fever that nearly killed her, about Nathan showing up with his medical bag, and his kind eyes, and his determination to save her life. She would tell them about learning to love again, about the guilt and the fear, and the eventual acceptance that the heart was big enough for multiple loves. And Nathan would hold her hand and add his own details, his own memories of those early days. The way Martha had looked lying in that sick bed, so young and scared but fighting so hard, the moment he realized he was falling in love with her. The joy of holding Sarah rose for the first time, knowing this child was his. The pride he felt watching Martha build her business and raise their children and become the heart of their family. On a warm June day in 1895, Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 69. Nathan held her hand as she took her last breath, and when she was gone, he wept for the woman who had given him 21 years of happiness. The whole town came to her funeral, remembering the seamstress who had been kind to everyone, who had helped so many people over the years, who had been a pillar of the community. They buried her next to Nathan, in the plot he had purchased years ago, and on her headstone they wrote, "Martha Winters Stone, beloved wife of Thomas Winters and Nathan Stone, devoted mother, she loved greatly and was greatly loved." Nathan lived 3 more years, spending his time with his children and grandchildren, working in his clinic almost until the end because he said idle hands made him think too much. When he died at 73, they buried him next to Martha, and Samuel made sure the headstone read, "Nathan Stone. Healer, husband, father. He saved lives and built love from ashes." And on quiet evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren would visit the graves on the hill overlooking South Pass City, they would stand together and remember the story they had been told so many times. The story of a sick woman crying from grief after losing the father of her child, and the healer who treated her body and her heart, and the love that grew between them despite all the reasons it should not have. They would remember that love was not simple or straightforward, that it could be complicated and messy and still beautiful, that grief and joy could exist side by side, that it was possible to honor the past while embracing the future. And they would look out over the town their grandparents had helped build, at the clinic and the shop that still stood after all these years, and they would understand that love, real, deep, lasting love, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. It was a story worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. Even when everything seemed lost, love could find a way to bloom again. And that was a truth worth holding on to then and always.